Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the SWestrans Board, Friday the 26th of September 2025. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the public recording will be made available on the website for public listening following this meeting. Remote participants on Teams, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting your microphones, switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Right, speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, although I will look out for virtual hands. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. Please speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraphs to allow everyone to follow. So we now move on to agenda item 1, which is the settlement and apologies. Claire, can you confirm who's present today?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm I've got apologies from Keith Walters this morning. We have Willie Scobie here substituting in his place. So we've currently got 6 board members present. Yourself, Councillor Hislop and Councillor Scobie here in the hall, the Vice Chair Karen Jackson and Tuki Campbell and David Ingalls on Teams. Not currently present is Stephanie Mottram. We have 3 observers present, being Luke Graham, Stuart Walker and Douglas Kirkpatrick. I should also advise that since the last board there's been a change in membership slightly. We have a change in the substitute on behalf of the independent group, which as of the 4th of September is now Jim Dempster instead of Richard Brodie, and I can perhaps anticipate a further change as Councillor Scobie, who we have here with us today, is standing down as a councillor, I believe on Monday. So I'll bring an update on that in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see you've got your hand up, Councillor Ingalls.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Sorry, I have to leave for an appointment at 11 o'clock, so hope to return around 11:30.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for that update on membership, Claire. So if we move on to item 2, which is the declarations of interest. Any board members have any declarations they wish to make? Vice Chair Karen Jackson.
Thanks, Chair. Can I make a statement of connection with item 10 by dint of my employment with South Scotland Enterprise? I don't believe it's an interest, so with the Chair's permission, I'd be very happy to stay in the meeting, but not participate in that element of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that's appropriate. Yes, I'm getting nods from governance. Are there any other statement of connections or declarations of interest? Don't see anyone wishing to come in. So we now move on to agenda item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the 27th of June 2025, and this is for approval. We're happy to approve. Great. Agreement in the room. Silence online. I'll take that as acceptance. Move on to agenda item 4, which is the minute of the meeting of the 23rd of July 2025. Again, this is for approval. Great. Thank you. Douglas, as an observer, do you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just some clarification. It's not anything about the minute itself. It's in relation to page 13, paragraphs 5.3, 5.4. It states there's an agreed prioritisation framework. Is this going to be made available to the public and observers at some point so we can see why the decisions were taken on the local bus network? That's my first question. On the second, in paragraph 5.4, can you confirm that the Monday to Saturday daytime 501 service is now operating under contract to SWestrans? It was previously commercial by Stagecoach, as stated. If so, it's for 6 months, and obviously that will need to come back to the board for any agreement for extension, if that's the case. And will that be the next board in November, given the January board will be very close to the 6-month period? Sorry for the long questions in my first meeting, Chair.
No, thanks very much for that, Douglas. Simon?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your questions, Douglas. In terms of that prioritisation methodology and the framework that's mentioned in item 5.3, as you'll be aware, Douglas, from the bus network review, which you yourself commissioned maybe 18 months or 2 years ago, that exercise and that report itself undertook an analysis of the bus network, indeed all the routes and services across the region, and as part of that, gave an indication of both subsidy per passenger, and as you'll be aware, the social value score that's associated with each of those services. That essentially was the framework which we utilised, and which through exempt session and through conversation with board members, we spoke with them about an approach that we would take, informed by that data and that analysis that had been undertaken previously, if savings needed to be made. And as you point out in the minute there, in 5.3, through that exercise, the 410, 411 and 412 services, which were ones which were consistently, by virtue of both subsidy per passenger, and the degree to which they fulfilled a necessary social value, were ones that were at the bottom of the order, if you like. So that was the prioritisation methodology, and that's contained in the bus network review, which I understand came to the board spring of last year, perhaps, before my time, but is in the public domain, so that is a public document. In relation to the 501, absolutely right, in connection with 5.4, there was a subsidy associated with that service, which is now operated by McCall's Coaches, that's for a period of 6 months, and you're absolutely right, in the fullness of time, and in due course we will need to consider exactly the appropriateness of how we seek the board's approval to continue with that service in connection with any subsidy associated with it.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, it's on the back of what Douglas was asking there in terms of the 410, 411, 412. 410, if I'm correct, maybe it could clarify, that would include the new loose service. Is that correct?
Simon?
Sorry, just so I understand your question. So
Yeah,
does the 410, 11, 12 include that service?
Yeah.
It does. It
Yeah,
does. That's right.
because
So
I was going to be asking questions under item 9, but seeing it's being raised here, it was just that one was being looked at in terms of trying to work with community transport to reintroduce, because what has happened here is that the area that was once served by public transport is now isolated with no transport if you happen to rely on public transport. Just to see if we're advancing any on getting a contract from community transport to bring back that service.
Yeah. I don't want to get into a debate on this. We're only asked to approve the minutes as a true record, so thank you very much. So with that, we'll just move on to agenda item 5, which is the calendar of meetings update. So Claire's here to assist. Do you want to come in, Claire?
Nothing really to add, just the point at 3.1, it's a request to bring the meeting forward by a week at the request of the external auditors to help them present the audited accounts. Thank you.
Okay, open it up to board members. Ivor?
Chair, I'm happy with the move, so if it suits other people, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. No other board members, observers? Anything on that? No? Okay, we'll go to recommendations, which members of the board are asked to agree an amendment to the calendar of meetings to accommodate the presentation of audited accounts, so that the next scheduled meeting is moved to the 21st of November 2025. Happy to do so. Yep, nods in the room. Thank you. Now move on to agenda item 6, which is the presentation of West Coast Mainline engineering works in January 2026. We have Damien Henderson. I did see you online, Damien. Welcome. If you could put your camera on, thank you. So Damien's here to provide a presentation, but first can we go through the procedural matter to agree that we can receive a presentation from Advantage West Coast? Agreed in the room? Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Damien.
Thanks, Chair, and apologies I'm not with you in person today. I had hoped to come down, but unfortunately got a bit of the lurgy, so I will present this online. I'm just going to share the presentation I have. Okay. And let's just check that's on. Can everyone see this okay?
We can see it in the room, yeah.
Okay.
And online.
Good. Okay, thanks. Well, thanks very much for inviting me along today. I'm not sure what the level of awareness is. It might vary amongst members of the board of the engineering work that's happening scheduled for January, but I thought it would be helpful to come and talk a bit about what's happening during that engineering works and the impact on Anglo-Scottish travel, and specifically some of the implications for Lockerbie as we utilise that as part of our operations. So I'll talk a little bit about the Clifton Bridge replacement. If you've not heard of that yet, I'm sure that is something that is going to command some more of your attention in the coming months and obviously in January. The passenger handling strategy, how we're looking after our passengers during those works, and then I'll talk a little bit about the specifics of what's being planned at Lockerbie. I'm happy to take questions. If anyone wants to stop me, then that's fine, and obviously happy to take questions at the end as well. Now just check you can all see a picture of a big site. Just ensure that's moving forward.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm just double checking you're seeing what I'm seeing. So Network Rail is replacing Clifton Bridge. Clifton Bridge is a rail bridge which is 60 years old. Its life expired, and I believe some investigatory works some years ago discovered that it wasn't. It needed replaced. I think there's a restriction at the moment of only one train can pass at a time, which is an operational constraint on the railway. So some work's been underway for some time now, including the construction of that site compound you can see to replace the Clifton Bridge, which is just near the M6 motorway junction at Penrith. I'm not an expert in these things, but I believe there's a modular construction of a replacement bridge, which is now well underway. But the bulk of that work, the actual demolition of the existing bridge and the replacement of the installation of the new bridge, happens over a 14-day period from the 1st of January in 2026. So as you can imagine, one of our focus areas as a passenger train operator, and working very closely with others, including Transpennine Express, Network Rail, other stakeholders such as Transport Scotland, SWestrans, we've been looking at how we can look after passengers during that disruption. It's quite a unique set of challenges we have, because for parts of that 14-day period, not only will the railway bridge be closed, but also the M6 will obviously need to close over 2 weekends. So that's obviously our diversionary services would normally operate by replacement bus. That's not an option for all of the days over that period. So we've been working very hard behind the scenes to keep passengers on train and kind of minimise the impact of that quite significant disruption on the West Coast Main Line. And the approach we are hopefully close to finalising now. It's still being worked through various industry validation processes and so forth. But we are hopeful that we can use the Settle and Carlisle line to keep passengers on train rather than bus, which, as I say, is critically important for this particular works because the M6 is not always an option. But also it's a better journey. Generally, it's recognised by Transport Focus and others that where you can keep people on trains, passengers tend to prefer that to going on a replacement bus, and there's evidence that they'll, to an extent, trade longer journey times over actually interchanging and taking a bus. So that's got a few implications. One is that the intent is to utilise Lockerbie as a train bus interchange. I'll talk in a bit more detail about that. But that also means that Lockerbie retains train services to the Central Belt. So there'll be a regular service every 2 hours to Edinburgh and Glasgow. Might be a bit small. I'll see if I can zoom it in on this a bit more. Beg your pardon. No, seems to be the answer to that. My apologies. But this gives some details on a day-to-day scheme. You can see there that the Sutton Carlisle line in dotted blue between Preston and Carlisle. So for customers travelling mostly from Preston and stops around there, the Sutton Carlisle route will be the means of getting to Carlisle and then onwards to Scotland. There'll be a bus between Carlisle and Lockerbie, and then an interchange at Lockerbie for train services onwards to Edinburgh and Glasgow. It's probably worth pointing out as well that that supporting route, the use of the Settle and Carlisle, won't be taking, for instance, customers from London who will go via East Coast, and even Liverpool, Manchester, Crewe. All these destinations will be better served by the East Coast. So it's a relatively limited scope, for the relatively limited catchment of passengers who will be utilising this service. But nevertheless, it's a helpful, or we see it as a helpful move whilst his works are ongoing. We're utilising our Evro trains, our bimode trains, which are new. They don't normally come up this way. So there's been a lot of work to go through the necessary industry validation processes and safety procedures and so forth to enable us to operate those trains on this route. We carried out a demonstration train back in August, and that was very successful. So I'll talk a little bit about Lockerbie. We have been having a series of meetings, workshops and planning sessions at Lockerbie to understand how that interface will work. We've involved SWestrans officers in that work for some time now. And as I say, they're still in chain, but I think they're now at a point where I think it'd be helpful to share a bit of detail about what that looks like. So again, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but the idea is to implement a temporary traffic order on the road, on Station Road outside the station, diverting traffic. You'll forgive me for forgetting the name of the road. High Street in Caledonian Place, so people can still access the station car park and the residential areas to the northwest of the station. And there's some engagement that's taking place with residents and businesses as those traffic orders are worked through to ensure they're supportive of that and understand the implications for their journeys. We're also working with the Salvation Army, who very generously, I have to say, were very keen to open their shop, which is just opposite the station, as a drop-in facility during the works, being as there'll be a higher volume than normal of passengers passing through Lockerbie. So they were quite keen to get involved, and we were really welcoming of that. And they're planning to have the cafe open and manned during that 2 weeks, so people can pop in and get a tea and a coffee. I think So next steps, as I say, this plan is still being finalised, but I thought it'd be helpful to make the board aware of where we're at now, so you're appraised of what work is ongoing. But we hope that will be finalised in the coming weeks. There's some work to do to get the necessary temporary road traffic orders at Lockerbie. As I say, we're working with the Salvation Army on a tea and coffee and drop-in facility. Some engagement with local residents and businesses ahead of the works, and then we'll, as you'd expect, have a communications plan to ensure that our customers understand how all of this will work and how they'll get about during this blockade. That's all I have, but as I say, very happy to take any questions you have. I think I can. Actually, I'm not sure how to stop sharing. But it's, oh, sorry. Okay. Oh.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Damien, for your presentation. So first of all, I'll open it up to board members and then to the observers. So Ivor Hislop.
Morning, Damien. Why is there a rail replacement service from Lockerbie to Carlisle? Is there works between those two stations happening? Because common sense would say bring the train just into Carlisle and transfer to the station there.
Yes, sorry, it's a good question, and my apologies. Yes, there is. There's also work ongoing, and some of those slides are a bit too small to probably see very easily, but there's work ongoing on the Kingmore signalling, which is just north of Carlisle, unfortunately. So it's the combination of those elements. As I say, it's quite a difficult challenge in terms of what the engineering possessions leave you with to actually operate services. So unfortunately, it is a bus Carlisle to Lockerbie. Obviously, fortunately, that's a relatively short bus journey. But yeah, unfortunately, that's because of that work just north of Carlisle.
Thank you. Any other board members? Don't see anyone wishing to come in, so I'll open it up to questions to the observers. Doesn't appear to be anyone. So it looks like an accepted presentation. So thank you very much for your presentation. Our recommendation was to receive that. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your time.
So we'll now move on to agenda item 7, which is the presentation of Strategic Roads Investment Plan. We've got Paul Junick from Transport Scotland is here to provide the presentation, but first can we go through the procedural matter to agree the recommendation, which is to ask the board to receive a presentation from Transport Scotland. We've got agreement in the room. Okay, so it's over to you then, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, before I move on, I spoke to Simon prior to the meeting, and I've shared my slides. Shall I share my slide directly, or would it be better to do that from locally?
I think the slides are already up on the screen. So
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. For me, okay. And Abby, are you able to share those?
Yes, they are being shared.
Okay.
You just need to say next slide for me.
Okay. For colleagues online, is that quite small?
Yes, we're just seeing it as a perfect now.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members. So, good morning, everybody. My name's Paul Junick. I'm Head of Infrastructure Planning at Transport Scotland. I have been working in the sort of southwest for quite a number of years now, and I've met a number of colleagues in the meeting through my work in the southwest. So, hopefully, this presentation will help understand where we are in terms of Transport Scotland's position with regards to sort of future investment on the trunk road network. So next slide, please. So I very quickly, in putting together the sort of presentation, I thought I would maybe just quickly run through sort of the main topics here which I've listed, which are really just to give an overview of the trunk road network in the southwest, to sort of just reinforce, I guess, the importance of the network and the various parts to that network. Look back a little bit, maybe to previous investment and current investment we're making in terms of Scottish Minister's investment in the trunk road network, motorway and trunk road network. I'd also like to then just make to take a quick look at work that has happened over the last, I don't know, 2 decades in terms of sort of planning for improvements to the network, in particular the 2 strategic transport projects reviews that have gone on. The most recent one was in 2022, was published in 2022, and the recommendations for that and how that affects or influences the work that we do on the trunk road network. And then just have a quick update on I guess the things that we're doing, the major things that we're doing currently around the network in the southwest, North East Galloway, and then finally just finish up with I guess an overview of some of the challenges, particularly the fiscal challenges, and understanding the sort of bigger picture here in terms of Scottish Minister's priorities. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the next slide here is just was really just to, I guess, give members a kind of an overview of the network if they maybe weren't totally familiar. So we obviously have a number of routes in Dumfries and Galloway. Probably the key route, cross-border route, and the most important cross-border route is the A74M, which from memory, about 80% of Scotland's cross-border road traffic uses the A74M at Gretna. On the left-hand side of the screen, I've just sort of indicated the various roads, so the A74M, the A7, the A75, the A76, A77, and of course the A701. And where I was able to get some the traffic flow, the typical daily traffic flow, 5-day, that is Monday to Friday flows, I've represented on screen there. So just giving you kind of giving members an indication of the sort of the variance, I guess, in the flow. One bit I have missed off there is the A751, which is the connecting road for those that know it, between the A75 and the A77 in and around or close to Stranraer. I think just in following that up, I think it's important to know just how important the network is. For example, about 35% of the cross-border flow in the A74 is HGV. Sorry, about 35% of the traffic flow across the border is HGVs. I think that the significance of that is not lost on anybody in terms of it's one of the key routes for freight, the movement of freight, and obviously given the importance nowadays in our supply chains for anything from retail to food to spare parts for equipment, everything that comes across the border is obviously a lot of that is working in that just-in-time space that many industries use. Obviously, the other key part is the route is linked to the A75 and the importance and the connection and movement of freight to and from the ports at Cairnryan. And I think looking across the routes, typically trunk roads carry anywhere between 15 and 25% of their flows are HGVs. I think which I think just reinforces the importance of the trunk road network in terms of the links and the supply and distribution of everything that we use and consume. And that's not lost, I think, on ministers in terms of the wider impact and importance of the network. Just some other typical some figures I found. So Dumfries and Galloway contains about 8% of Scotland's total road network. Only Aberdeen and the Highlands and Islands actually have more. It has about 14% of Scotland's motorway network. and I'm talking about in terms of length of road network. In terms of traffic itself, totally, it represents the amount of traffic on Dumfries and Galloway's roads are about 5% of the total. And in terms of motorway traffic, it's closer to 10%, given the importance and the length of the network that extends through the eastern half of the region. If I can move on to the next slide, please. So, in preparing the slide, I also was trying to get a picture of the wider importance of the network, and I think, and in particular, the trunk road network. So the bar chart on the left-hand side of the screen represents the proportions of traffic on various parts of the network. So I'll explain that a little bit more. So in terms of total vehicle kilometres driven across the whole of the region, was 2.26 billion vehicle kilometres in 2023, of which 34% was driven on the motorway network, or on the motorway sections of the motorway, and 30% was on rural trunk roads. So if you add those two together, you're close to 2/3 of the total volume or total amount of vehicle kilometres, i.e. traffic movements happening on either the motorway network or on the trunk road network. And I think that importance of that, I think, it should not be lost on anybody in terms of why it's essential that we have a robust, resilient, and most importantly, a sort of a network which provides that function to move strategic traffic and obviously local traffic, but more importantly the strategic traffic across and through the region. And I think that importance is further compounded, I suppose, by the fact that we understand, where that movement or where that traffic, where that freight, where those people are going to and from. I think on the right-hand side of the screen, I just wanted to reflect on the proportions here in terms of the total length. So there's about 4,500 kilometres of road in Dumfries and Galloway, of which about 8% that motorway and trunk road. So you've got effectively 2/3 or 64% of traffic actually operating or running around on or driving on probably about 8% of the total road network, which is quite a significant amount. So if I could move on to the next slide, please. So just looking back and a bit of a look forward as well, looking back and sort of current picture. In terms of investment, and I appreciate that not all of this was actually in Dumfries and Galloway, but I thought it helpful to members to see the sort of what we have invested or what ministers have invested in. So since 2007, there have been 6 major road schemes on the A75. Their primary focus was about improving overtaking opportunities, removing pinch points. On the A77, and I appreciate there's only a small part of the A77 on in Dumfries and Galloway, but actually what we have is the A77 is obviously very important to the southwest and in particular feeding down to the ports of Cairnryan. And we've had 5 separate schemes, the most recent of which was, for those that are familiar with the A77, the Mabel bypass, which opened in January of 2022. And let's not forget the 2 schemes we've had one on the A7 at Auckland River, and the A76 at Glen Earley. So cover the next slide, please. So this is just a quick summary of the investment we make to make sure that the road network continues to operate and work as a strategic transport network. So I just wanted to give colleagues and the board an understanding of the investment we make. So I've tried to break it down by route. Obviously, and this is for the financial years 2020 to 21 through to 2023-24. So this is the total spend. But this reflects, I guess, the investment and the importance of investment. So this covers things like road surfacing, barrier replacements, all of those things that need to happen in terms of making sure that the network runs data is in good working order or is available for traffic. And I appreciate the challenges down here in terms of what that implications are sometimes for example, when we are doing major resurfacing work or major improvements that require the sort of closure or partial closure of parts of particularly the 75 and the A7, which A77, sorry, and other routes which possibly don't have the and the diversions that result as and the impact of those. So, if I could move on to the next slide, then please. So that was, I guess, the picture we've just looked back at the network, at the importance of the network, the sort of kind of recent and current ongoing sort of investment that Transport Scotland has to make. But I thought what would be helpful is to give members an understanding of just where we are in terms of going forward. So some members, and hopefully others, will be aware that we've had two strategic transport projects reviews covering the whole of Scotland and the whole of the transport network. The first one was in 2008. I won't dwell on that other than just to say it happened and was published in 2008. The second and current strategic transport projects review was published in December of 2022, and that had some significant recommendations for the trunk road network in Dumfries and Galloway. In particular, in total there were 45 recommendations covering the whole spectrum of the transport system in Scotland, so everything from active travel through bus infrastructure, through the ferry network, our roads network, our rail network, and covering the whole spectrum of how we operate and pointing to, I guess, the major investment priorities. For the Southwest, the recommendation 40 from STPR2 or from the review made specific reference to the A75 and A77. And that was because, and I'll have a bit more detail on that in a minute, because of the importance of those, not just to the region, but to Scotland, and particularly in the case of the A77, how that connects to traffic using that connects to the wider, connects Northern Ireland to the rest of the UK and I guess beyond that. And finally on this slide, just a quick note that there were 3 other recommendations directly related to how we operate the trunk road network, and I'll mention that in a minute as well. So if we could move on, please, to the next slide. I thought it was helpful to members if I put this slide up and just to explain what STPR2 was. So it was undertaken over a period of close to 3 years of work from 2019 through to 2022 when we published the draft recommendations. It was about giving Scottish ministers a programme of potential investment opportunities from the period 2022 to 2024. So 20 years of understanding that what were going to be the priorities there to help deliver Scotland and make Scotland deliver the opportunities that required, and the importance of how that then connected with all other parts of Scottish ministers' sort of priorities and agenda. And on the right-hand side of the screen, the 5 grey boxes there, takes climate action, addresses inequalities. These are the top 4 of those were around what we members might know as the National Transport Strategy, and very close. They are linked to the National Transport Strategy's 4 objectives. The 5th one at the bottom was something that came out of the process when we were doing the review and identified by stakeholders as one of the key aspects in terms of increased safety and resilience of the transport network. And in the middle of the slide, the middle bottom of the slide, there is the sustainable investment hierarchy, and hopefully members may have seen this already in various guises. But I think the importance of this is can't be understated in terms of how we approach the review. And this was one of the criteria in the multi-criteria assessment that was used when we were selecting those 45 recommendations for that emerged from the review. At the top of that inverted pyramid is the reducing the need to travel, maintaining and safely operating the existing asset, making better use of the existing capacity of the asset, and only after having gone through all of those top three recommendations or sort of assessments did we then look to see whether or not there was a need for targeted infrastructure. So that included, in the case of trunk roads, whether there was a need to for a specific intervention or improvement. If I could have the next slide, please. So just jumping back to the point I was making about in terms of the specific recommendations. So recommendation 40 from the Strategic Transport Projects Review was clear. It clearly identified the evidence needed to that we needed to invest, and Minister needed to invest in the A75 and A77 as strategic road corridors. Across both routes, the improvements could look like a number of different types of enhancements or improvements. So when we talk about, and apologies for the jargon, WS2+1, it's a wide single carriageway, so 2+1 arrangements. So if anybody knows the Dunraggett bypass or the Mabel bypass, you'll know what that looks like in terms of a 2 lanes in one direction to allow safe overtaking, with 1 lane coming in the other direction. But that wasn't limited to just that. It was also looking at climbing lanes and other types of intervention or project that could improve or remove pinch points. I think, as I already mentioned, the importance of both of these routes is important in terms of not just Scotland, but also the wider economy, the UK economy, in terms of linking Northern Ireland to the rest of the UK. And it was also about providing those benefits, not just to through traffic or strategic traffic, but also to the communities that served along both routes. Just in terms of the specific examples, and we'll come on to this in the next slide. For the A75, for example, the recommendation from the sort of sub-recommendation from this recommendation was included the realignment of the A75 at Springholm and Crocketford, improvements at the Cuckoo Bridge roundabout at Dumfries, and then for the 77, for example, these were just typical examples, looking at improvements to the section of the A77 between Turnberry and Girvan, between Ballantrae and Smerton, and then further north there was a number of junctions around Ayr on the A77. And to be clear, these were examples. They are not the totality of the recommendation, and it is expected, and work is ongoing about how we then take forward a sort of wider understanding of both those routes, both A75 and A77. If I could have the next slide, please.
Paul, just before you come in,
sure.
It was remiss of me not to give you an allotted time, so have you got many more slides left?
No, I've got two, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just briefly wanted to mention to colleague, to the board, that we obviously, for those that may be aware, there were there was exhibitions this week on the improvements works that's going on at Springholm and Crocketford. I won't dwell on the detail of that, but details are available on the Transport Scotland website. Could I have the next slide, please? And then just briefly, I wanted to mention the other 3 recommendations which had specific focus for the trunk road network were recommendations 30, which was about investing in safety and improvements. Recommendation 31, which was about looking at those vulnerable parts of the trunk road network where, for example, landslips or erosion was a challenge, and weather events would have an impact. And 32 is around continued investment in the resilience and I guess the reliability. So those are all the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. If I can move on to the last slide then, please. So just in summing up, what we have is a plan, I suppose, in what I've just described in terms of the look forward in terms of investment. But I think I just wanted to identify the fact that we've had the UK spending review published in June of this year. That's given Scottish ministers an indication about its sort of short and medium term funding envelope. However, there still remains a significant challenge around capital funding and the availability of capital to take forward improvements. Work at the moment that I'm involved in is looking at how the current programme and portfolio of improvements, so the A9, A96 and all of the other investments on ferries, active travel and all of that, how all of that comes together in terms of the investment required, plus the 45 recommendations that I mentioned in the review. And some may be aware that there's also a Scottish spending review currently ongoing in terms of the look forward and also a refresh potentially to the infrastructures. This is Scotland's infrastructure investment plan. And how all that fits together is going to be key to how future transport investment looks over the next, well, certainly short, medium, and potentially long term. And without a doubt, there still remains a big challenge there. And thank you very much. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Paul. So I'll open it up to board members first of all, and then observers. So I've got Councillor Scobie. Willie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Paul. I was hoping maybe I could have seen you in person, just to ask if you're going to reply to my email that I sent you twice now.
Do you know what? I've got it drafted, Councillor Scobie. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. But, thanks for your presentation. And I think it was 2016, indeed, when John Swinney and Humza Yousaf, on his 100-day consultation, indeed it was in Dumfries, announced that he would have a review on the trunk roads and transport in Scotland. So that's how long we've waited on the STPR2. And as you know, it's been in draft form, I don't know how many times. But, just coming back to what you were saying about how important the trunk roads really are to Dumfries and Galloway, I would argue that the most important one is the A77 in as far as contribution to the Scottish economy. It serves the M8 corridor and the rest of Scotland, and it's the only road that links Scotland to Northern Ireland. And as you rightly say, there's some £10 million of goods through freight that travel on a daily basis from Cairnryan to and from Northern Ireland. So that's how important it is to the Scottish economy. But you've heard us say on numerous occasions, Paul, that the A77 doesn't get its fair share of capital investment. And I know you referred there to 64 million. But again, you've heard us say in the last 10 years, there's been some £10 billion of capital investment where the three trunk roads in the southwest of Scotland, the 75, 76 and 77, I think their total has been 0.04% of that £10 million. So it's little wonder that we feel we are the forgotten corner of Scotland, because just, again, referring back to the freight, then it is just-in-time goods. And when the 77's closed, there's something like 109 miles of detour, for the lorries to take, and it's nigh impossible to get their goods to where they want to go in that time. I'm looking at STPR2, and as you rightly say, 40 recommendations. But as far as we're concerned, and I'm referring to the campaign group that I also serve on, it doesn't go far enough on the 77. It's not just about straightening a few corners and putting in a couple of passing places, because that's what we did have in the last 5 investments on both roads, and I think it was Stena that insisted they get that, or they were considering withdrawing from the port of Cairnryan. So we did get it, but it still hasn't given the commitment that it should get to these trunk roads, recognising, as you have done, the high importance of it. And again, when we look at the revenue spend for the 70 million pound, that just highlights in comparison just how bad a road it is. It's a non-engineered road that we've spoken about on numerous occasions. So in terms of how we move forward, as your last slide referred to, and the time that STPR2 has been on the go, and I refer back to Humza Yousaf in 2016, announcing, as he did in Dumfries, that they would look at this, then it's when will the STPR2 be reported and endorsed by the Scottish Government? Because it's been in draft form for I don't know how long, and yet never reported. So it's to recognise the importance of the 77, the 75, perhaps, in my opinion, the unfairness, both by Scottish Government and UK Government, because out of the 8.5 million that was given to the A75, the A77 didn't get a penny. Yet the previous Scottish Secretary did say under the Hendy report that the A77 would be recognised if the UK Government picked up the 75, then the Scottish Government would pick up the 77. So it's when will we see the STPR2, and is it still capable of being amended to recognise the high importance these trunk roads have to the ports of Cairnryan, the two ferry ports of Cairnryan? I could go on, Chair, but I'll cut it at that.
Thanks. Long-winded, but you got there to get your question in there, Councillor Scobie, and I believe a statement of connection as well. So over to you, Paul. Can you answer Councillor Scobie's question?
I will try, Chair. Thank you. So thank you for the question, or thank you for the proposal and commentary there, Councillor Scobie. We've obviously worked on this, been working on this for quite some time, and you're absolutely right. It's taken it's taken a period, but I think the importance of that is that what we've got now in terms of STPR2 is a set of recommendations. So in answer to your question, there is the 45 recommendations that were published on the 8th of December 2022, which includes recommendation 40 and identifies the A75 and A77 as as critical and important for investment. I think what you're referring to, Councillor Scobie, is then, I guess, the plan that we had at the time to publish a delivery plan, which would kind of set out some of the milestones for investment. We've not been able to do that for various reasons since 2022 because of various incidents. Well, I'm going back to the change of government, the impact of inflation, the change of UK governments have all impacted that. I think what we are now in a place that we can safely say is that we've got a clear idea about sort of future spend or future capital investment from UK government. Scottish ministers are now obviously undertaking the spending review, as I mentioned. We are, and alongside that is going to be a refresh or planned refresh to the infrastructure investment plan. So how we deal with transport specifically is something that ministers are giving careful consideration to right now in terms of how all of this does. And as I think I mentioned, one of my tasks, wearing my other hat, is how all of this comes together in terms of a short, medium and long-term portfolio of investment priorities. As you appreciate, I think, there's never, if there was more money available, they're obviously able to do more, and that's the challenge, I think, in terms of making sure, that's the space we're in at the moment in terms of actually understanding what we have and how we can deliver that. So I can't give you a firm answer right now, but all I can say is that it's being given that serious and careful consideration, and I think Councillor Scobie, in terms of the meetings that we've had, both with the Cabinet Secretary and others, that the importance here is not lost, I think, and that would be fair to say, Chair, in terms of the investment for the South West.
You want to come back in?
Yeah,
Nolan?
Chair, just through my connection, I'm sure we will pick up many of these issues. All I would ask again is for Lay 77 to get its fair share, recognising the importance, and indeed as I've outlined, I believe it's more important than the A75 in terms of contribution to the Scottish economy, you know, and serving the M8 corridor. So I'll pick up many of these through my connection with Paul at hopefully a future meeting in the near future. Paul.
Paul's nodding, so he's in agreement. Councillor Hislop, Ivor.
Morning, Paul. I think, yeah. Just
Morning.
out of curiosity, we have a limited budget and we have 45 recommendations. Do all recommendations hold the same priority, or are those 45 in priority order?
Really good question, Councillor. So there are 45 recommendations. A number of those, for example, I think there are 7 or 8 active travel ones, recommendations related to active travel, for example. A lot of those were effectively consolidating work that was either ongoing or, I guess, moving in terms of focus. So some of those were new, others were ongoing. But you're right. I mean, if you look at the broad spectrum of recommendations, everything was there. There was the active travel, for example. Obviously, ministers are placing a large importance on, as they are with road maintenance and making sure that we invest in the trunk road networks, and, for example, the ferry network. There are other things there which we see as long-term recommendations. For example, I can't remember I think it's recommendation 41, which is about looking at fixed links between some of our key islands and replacing some of the ferry networks. And we see those, for example, are seen as being longer term, given the amount of work that would be required. So if you remember back to what I said at the start of the presentation, this is like a 20-year outlook. So we expected some to start, some to be ongoing, some to start within the sort of first 5 to 10 years, others to be looking sort of maybe not starting to sort of years 10 and beyond. So no, it's not a prioritised list. And one of the things that Councillor Scobie was alluding to there, in terms of it was the intention when we published in December of 2022 to have a delivery plan which kind of gave a broad kind of outline as to when things might start, but we've not been able to do that, and hopefully we're moving into space that might become that might become a reality. But there is still a lot of work to do, and that obviously is dependent on, I think, as I said, the spending review and work that is going on in the sort of wider Scottish Government for infrastructure more widely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hislop. Any other board members before I go to observers? Don't see anyone online, so I'll move over to observers. Any questions? No? Well, thanks again, Paul, for your presentation. It's been nice seeing you this morning. So the recommendation was to receive the report, and we have done for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Paul.
Now move on to agenda item 8, which is presentation of the South of Scotland Enterprise. Our Vice Chair, Karen Jackson, will provide the presentation. So again, can we go through the procedural matter to agree that we take this presentation? Happy to do so? Agreed in the room? Over to you then, Karen.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, colleagues. Just let me share my screen. And I'll just turn it on to presentation mode, so just let me know if that's working. Your colleague seeing an overview slide.
Not
Sorry,
seeing anything yet, Karen.
Sorry, nothing's coming through, Karen. I have the presentation here if you'd like me to run it, and you can say next slide.
Abby, if you would, that would be brilliant.
Not a problem.
That just saves us all from that inevitable, oh gosh, moment. So let me
That's the one, is it?
Yes, that's perfect. Brilliant.
There we
Thank you
go.
very much for that, Abby. Appreciate it. Brilliant. And thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity to share more information about South of Scotland Enterprise and the work we're doing as an organisation to drive economic growth across the region, and also trying to draw out the links that makes to the delivery of the SWestrans ambitions and also the regional transport strategy. I suspect for a lot of you it's going to be a bit of a refresher about SOSI, but I hope generally helpful to board members. So in my day job, I'm Director of Strategy and Insight at South of Scotland Enterprise, and I'm one of your 2 external board members nominated by SOSI to fill the place on the board that the legislation has identified for the local enterprise agency. Abby, if you move on. So as an organisation, we're Scotland's newest enterprise agency. We were set up by the South of Scotland Enterprise Act 2019, and we came into being on the 1st of April 2020. So this year saw us turn 5. In terms of our remit, we focus on the economy, environment and community, and that 3-pronged approach is really important to us. So we talk about prosperity, planet and people, and we're focused on supporting economic growth in the region to create an area that's fair and flourishing. And we're really proud to be different and to be shaped by the needs of the region. So we've taken the time to listen to what people want and need, and then try to respond. Central to the way we work is that for the South, by the South and in the South, we want to be responsive and provide what the region needs to be successful. For us, partnership is also really vital. We're part of that established Team South of Scotland approach. So that brings together partners, including both local authorities and other key bodies involved in economic development. So bodies like Visit Scotland and Skills Development Scotland. We're a public body and we're led by a chair and a board of 10. And those people are both passionate and very knowledgeable about the region and remain really ambitious for its success. In terms of structure, we have a staff of around 140 people, and we receive our money from Scottish Government with a grant in aid of about £29 million, I think, this financial year. Next slide. So a map that will be really familiar to everybody, but just to highlight the area that we cover. So we cover the area of 2 local authorities, Dumfries and Galloway, and also Scottish Borders Council. And while we might be one of the newer areas on the Scottish regional map, we're absolutely at the centre of the UK, and that's something we really like to highlight. It gives us a really strong locational and competitive advantage. We're about a 2-hour drive from 14 million people. And Paul was giving some interesting stats about the road network, and in comparison, the area we cover is about 15% of Scotland's land mass. It's 250 kilometres coast to coast, but as we all know, that masks the time it takes to travel those kilometres. We only have about 5% of Scotland's population and 4 towns over 10,000 people. So one of the lowest population densities in Scotland at 24 people per square kilometre. As a region, we're a region of small and micro businesses, and we make no apology for that. There are around 11,800 operating in the region, and that gives us a really diverse and entrepreneurial business base and a varied supply chain. We remain strong in traditional sectors, so the land-based sector, manufacturing, food and drink, textiles and tourism, but there are lots of opportunities that we're seeing in new sectors linked to the region's natural assets, and that gives us that opportunity to be a really strong economy as we move forward. As everybody knows, we've got 2 coastlines and 2 key ports, and that gives us direct access to Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland. As an organisation, we work very closely with the further education and higher education institutes in the region, and that again gives us a really strong base in terms of the skill offer of the region. If you move on. So as an organisation, we've captured our strategic priorities in our 5-year plan, and we call them our 6 A's. So both for excellence, but also because we're at the beginning of our journey as an organisation. They're very intertwined, and they focus us on attracting investment to the region, supporting entrepreneurship, supporting innovation and productivity, delivering net zero and nature positive solutions, advocating for fair work, and supporting and developing our enterprising communities. And behind that, what sort of work we're doing is providing support and advice, drawing together partnerships and collaborations, as well as inevitably financial support. If you move on. So just some statistics there, and you'll be glad to know I'm not going to read them all out for you, but just gives you an idea of the impact we're seeing. We recently published our 5th annual report, and you can see on that slide some of the statistics that capture the impact we're having. Overall, it's been a record-breaking year for us as an organisation. We've engaged with over 2,000 organisations across the region, which is the highest number in our history, so a good growth trajectory there. We've approved about £10 million in funding across the region, and that's for 550 client-facing projects, so with businesses and with communities. And that helps drive innovation and growth across the south. We've been unlocking ambition at every level, from new entrepreneurs, so really looking at how we bring people in and those people with ambitions to start their business, and also to those established businesses that we have operating in the region. We've seen over 3,000 people benefit from our coaching and events, and our pilot project Pathways has supported 260 women and underrepresented individuals start their new businesses. So we've seen 100 people start new businesses that wouldn't otherwise have existed. And we've been really pleased to see that about 2/3 of our funded organisations are female-led, and that's a really powerful signal of the South's entrepreneurial potential. Inward investment inquiries have gone up over 400%, and that's been driven by our designation as the first ever natural capital innovation zone. So a real interest in the region from investors wanting to come here. We've made progress at Chapel Cross with plans for a green hydrogen facility, and again, a real anchor for the region's energy transition ambitions. And we've been proud to play a role in the Transformational Centre Parks development, and also the work we're doing around the Mountain Bike Innovation Centre across in the borders. If you move on. As well as the work we're doing as an organisation, we're a really core member with both local authorities in the Regional Economic Partnership. And through that partnership, we've developed a regional economic strategy for the region. And that ties really closely to the work of SWestrans in terms of the Regional Transport Partnership. A strategy is only as good as the delivery. So the strategy is accompanied by a delivery plan. So how are we going to deliver our vision of creating a green, fair and flourishing south of Scotland? If you move on. That's just a quick overview of what the delivery plan is looking like. So we've really tried to strip out to the priority areas that can only be delivered in collaboration. So there's masses of activity in lots of the individual members of the REP organisations, but what can we do together to really maximise the impact? The REP early on identified what they describe as the grand challenges of the region. So those really big things that we need to shift if we're going to unlock the ambition. So looking at housing, looking at skills and looking at transport. On transport itself, the REP has set up the Strategic Action Group for Transport, and that's chaired by Councillor Jenny Linehan across in the borders. And Jenny's been to SWestrans previously to give a bit of an update on the work. SWestrans are part of that group, which is brilliant, along with the councils, SWestrans, Visit Scotland, Skills Development Scotland, but it also brings in the health board and the community sector. So a good mixture of people driving forward the work to really unlock the transport opportunities we have. And my final slide just really gives a really quick overview of what SOCI as an organisation are doing to in the transport sphere. So we recognise just how important transport is to a successful economy. And while we're not a transport provider ourselves, our legislation suggests that we should promote improved transport. So just on that slide, a really quick overview of some of the specific transport activities that we're doing that contributes to delivering the regional transport strategy objectives. So we provide support to communities for active travel projects. So we're involved in both Destination Tweed and the Tweed Trail, and also provided funding for active travel paths. I mentioned the Mountain Bike Innovation Centre. So again, a real opportunity to capitalise on something that the region is well known for and a real strength here. We've previously chaired the South of Scotland Cycling Partnership and provided funding for cycling facilities through our Cycling Infrastructure Fund. And we've worked with partners to develop and support the Patrick Coast to Coast route. We've also supported business development and skills within businesses. We've looked at fleet decarbonisation support for bus companies and HGVs. We're supporting innovation with companies like McReba and their ambitions around recycling material plastics into road provision. Our work with skills providers been key, and a real focus there on how we drive green skills development in the region. And we've been working with Skills Development Scotland to ensure that we keep that rural perspective in the minds of policymakers. More prosaically, we've helped fund the community transport, and with Dumfries and Galloway Council and SWestrans have contributed to that community transport post. And in terms of infrastructure, we've worked particularly with IMouth to develop port authorities and look at what IMouth can offer to the economy, both of the region but also of Scotland. And again, we've funded some work around investment into electric vehicle charge points in Dumfries and Galloway. Chair, that was a really rapid canter, I know, through what we're about as an organisation. My final slide, I promise, just gives you some contact details for us as an organisation. Hopefully that's been useful for colleagues, though, to just hear a little bit more about us as an organisation and our areas of focus. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Karen. Very informative. I'll open it up, first of all, to board members. Councillor Scobie, Willie.
Yeah, just to thank Karen again for her presentation and recognising just how important trunk roads are, just as our previous speaker intimated or illustrated. And from my connection, I can say that we as a community campaign team attended the Oyster Festival and we took a petition to the Oyster Festival, and it's a busy place, people coming and going. So from that, on the 8 hours we were there, we got some 500 signatures, and most of the people from all over Scotland were saying just how bad the A77 was. So it's just maybe to make a plea to Karen that as a campaign team, we're quite happy to come and make a presentation on some of the stuff that I spoke of earlier. Just to recognise how important trunk roads are to the economy of Dumfries and Galloway, tourism, industry and so forth, if we're ever to attract industry back into Dumfries and Galloway, particularly in the west of the region.
Thanks, Willie. Karen?
So very fair point, Councillor Scobie, and I think the Oyster Festival, a brilliant demonstration of some of the fantastic events in the region, so lots of great profile from that. So I'll ignore the trunk roads point for a minute, but it's events like that which are really, as you say, really contribute strongly to the economy of the South and highlighting the opportunity for tourism across the region. I think I take issue a little bit about attracting industry to the region. I think there's lots of really good work going on, but absolutely get that point about people need to get here as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. Any other board members? Open it up to observers. Douglas.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, Karen. Nice to see you again. Just very briefly, it's about community transport, and I'm aware this might not be just a question for yourself, but perhaps for Simon as well. Is there going to be an update paper on where we are with community transport across the whole of the south of Scotland? It's going to be a critical part of the transport network going forward, and I'd just be interested to see what the current position is and how that is fitting in with the challenges that are obviously ongoing at present.
Thanks, Douglas. So who wants to come in first? Karen or Simon?
So I'll pass very quickly to Simon.
Yeah,
if I may.
thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
But hello, Douglas.
And thanks for the question, Douglas. Absolutely fair point. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of work going on in the community transport space, which collectively both the Council and SWestrans are involved in. As you might know, third sector Dumfries and Galloway have a nominated officer who is leading in terms of the development and progression of community transport in the region. So, in fact, just next week, I've got a periodic catch-up that I have with her. So, very happy to raise that point and suggest that she brings an update to SWestrans board.
Thank you. Don't see anyone else wishing to come in. So, with that, thanks very much, Karen, for your presentation. And we'll just move on to agenda item 9, which is the local bus network update. Members of the board will have been provided with a copy of this report in a supplement pack earlier this week. We've got Simon Bradbury, Gordon Bryce and Karen Brownlee from the council are here also to assist. So I'll just pass this over to Simon initially.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies for the lateness of this item, which came out slightly after the remainder of the updates, as you'll imagine. The exercise of the bus network itself and the extent to which there are changes being made is a moving feast and is constantly changing. So we wanted to make sure that we presented the board with the most up-to-date situation. I'm sure board members will be alarmed by the mention in the paper in relation to the commercial 383 service. So that's why I just wanted to come in and provide an update before we take any questions from board members. I'm pleased to say that as recently as last night, we were still in discussion with SWestrans coaches who currently run the 383 on a commercial basis. On that particular corridor of the 383, there are entitled children. By that I mean children that are entitled to free school transport from home to school. And so we've reached an agreement, as I say, just yesterday evening with SWestrans coaches, whereby following the exercise of a competitive procurement process, we've identified ways in which to transport those children to school, namely Annan Academy and Lockerbie Academy. And I'm pleased to say that the solution we've identified that represents best value and also enables us to secure the continued operation of the 383 is for essentially for a subsidy to be provided to SWestrans coaches to continue to operate the 383 by taking those entitled children to Annan and Lockerbie Academy. So, as I say, that was agreed very recently in advance of this board, but I'm sure you'll agree, good news that that continues to secure the operation of the 383 in future on a commercial basis and enables the council to fulfil its statutory duties in relation to the transportation of those children to Annan and Lockerbie Academy. So just a piece of good news on that item, but otherwise I'm very happy to take any questions from board members.
Thank you very much for that update. So I'll open it up initially to the board members. Councillor Scobie, Willie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll refer back to my earlier remarks, and that's in respect of the 410, 11 and 12 and New Luce. Maybe not perhaps a question of Simon, but more to the council officials who are here today in terms of our responsibility to the people of that area, the New Luce area, who now have been literally isolated from public transport. When I last spoke to Gordon, there was an opportunity, hopefully, to sit down, discuss with transport, community transport, how we could provide some form of transport to that area. And I just wondered how far we've got with those negotiations and when they're likely to be concluded, notwithstanding previous decisions in terms of subsidy marked against that particular area. There is still a responsibility on the council to provide some form of service. Again, in terms of the reviews, there's been mixed reviews on the network, some good, some bad. Passengers in Stranraer have commented on how delighted they are with the service and the buses being used. And indeed, I believe they even might have got a reduction in fare, which pleased them even more. But marked against that, and it's recognised in the report, is the 500. And from the concessionary fares that may have been in place, the fare seems to have shot up for people travelling on that 500. Again, it's recognised in the report. There was reference made in the media to students and their concessionary fares. Again, recognised in the report. It's when can we expect to get some response to that in terms of the contractor and the fare charges that are being made. And my last point would be, you know, on page 8, the 359 Glentrill, and only read it last night in the BBC news bulletin. a bus coming in from, I take it, Girvan, service in Glentrill, arrives at 11:25 on a Saturday and departs at 11:30 on the same day, and that's the only return on a Saturday. I wonder what we're doing about that in terms of providing adequate and suitable services for the people of the Glentrill area. Number of questions, Chair.
Thanks, Willie. And I'm sure you'll also welcome the comfort break or comfort stop on the 500, which you and I have always pushed at. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your comments and questions, Councillor Scobie. Just to take those in order, the 410, 411, 412 service. As you'll know from previous board meetings, with a finite subsidy budget available to SWestrans, we had to make those decisions, which we touched upon earlier in the session, in terms of the prioritisation and the approach that we took to the spend of that finite resource available to us. And unfortunately, the 410, 411 and 412, on the basis of the number of passengers and the subsidy cost that is provided to those three services, which are essentially taken at one. So just looking at the figures, so in terms of the average subsidy cost per passenger across those three services, it was in excess of £66 for each passenger that's taken, and on average 2 passengers per day for each of those services. So I suppose that's the first thing to point out, is that they're very lightly utilised in terms of passenger figures on those vehicles. It was exceptionally low. That being said, I would not seek to minimise the extent to which that provided a service to the people of those communities, and so for that reason we have commenced discussion with Wigtonshire Community Transport, who previously provided those services. Now you'll recognise the sensitivity of the fact that we're having a conversation with the community transport operator, who previously used to be paid a subsidy in order to operate those services. And in the absence of any subsidy budget, in the sense that the SWestrans subsidy budget is fully committed, it's not an easy fix, but it is one that we've commenced. We're in active discussion with Wigtonshire Community Transport, and we'll continue to engage with them to understand what capacity that they have to support in this, in terms of providing access to transport services in those areas, and the extent that they can do that, frankly, without any financial support from SWestrans to do that. So we'll continue to engage with them and continue to understand what they can do to support. But as I say, at this moment in time, we don't have a solution to the replacement of those services, or indeed what WCT can do to help. But I'm well aware of the need for that, and it's one that we continue to press ahead with. The 500 service, we've had numerous feedback in relation to fares across the region. As I mentioned in the board paper and the update itself, we're well aware of this issue, and I also provide some explanation for why that is, which in many ways leads back to the withdrawal of Western Buses Limited from the region, and the extent to which they had a number of fare saver options, essentially, which included the 500 service. With Houston's coaches now picking up the 500 service on a subsidy, as mentioned, there's a number of changes to that services, and we continue to engage actively with all operators, Houston's in particular, and that includes in relation to the 500 service and around fares. And so they're aware of the issue, they're aware of, amongst the variety of different fare saving options that they have available. That doesn't currently include the 500, but it is something that they're actively looking into, and we continue to engage with them on that. And we hope that there may be some good news in relation to 500. And indeed, I noticed from their Facebook page, they're continuing to introduce options in relation to student and college travel on the 500, and they're looking at potentially broadening that. The 359 service, yet well aware in terms of the concerns of the local community, and we fully recognise the extent to which the timetable with respect to the 359 is far from ideal, and that is there's no way of sugarcoating it. That is an issue in relation to the timetable, which clearly doesn't work for the community, and something that we are endeavouring to put right and try and identify a solution to it. At this point in time, we're not quite at a point of having a solution to that, but it's something that that's SWestrans in discussion and debate with DGC buses operating that route in the west of the region are looking into what we can do to try and ensure that the service from Glentrool and other areas to Newton Stewart makes more sense than it does currently. So that's one we're looking into, and we hope that we'll be able to provide an update on that service in the very near future.
Willie?
Thanks, Chair, for letting me back in. I can understand SWestrans' position in terms of subsidy for the new loose service and perhaps breaking it right down to the 2 passengers. But, you know, it's the responsibility the council has to providing areas for some form of transport, public transport and so forth. I just wonder where we are with that in terms of the council. And I hear what you're saying, Simon, in terms of it not being an easy fix. But I remember many years ago sitting on SWestrans when we looked at passenger numbers and so forth, and is it right to put on a 50-seater if we're only getting 2 people to pick up? Can we not put on a car and for passengers to be able to pick up a phone and phone? Because Newlands is only, from my knowledge, about 3 miles away from Glenluce. And if that could be possible, rather than, you know, I'm not trying to take away from Wigton Community Transport, but if that was a way of dealing with it, then we could dial a car, dial a bus, and have someone there that's able to take them to the link to Glenluce. Just a suggestion, rather than just looking at it as a service, but a dial a bus, dial a car service. So there are ways and means that this can be tackled and still provide those 2 passengers that are heavily subsidised with a much cheaper way of travel and providing that responsibility. So, you know, I don't know what the council's position is in terms of new loose and isolation. If we could maybe hear from them.
Thanks, Willie. Demand responsive transport's been to the board a number of times. You know, there's been reports on that. Don't know where we are at this moment in time. I don't know if is that our responsibility or the council's responsibility. I'm looking at governance. Is it our responsibility, demand responsive transport? Simon first.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. So demand responsive transport is certainly a possible solution, and I'd concur with your point that the 410, 411, 412, the service to Luce is to Glenluce is certainly one of those whereby we might question whether a scheduled bus service is the right solution in terms of providing connectivity and accessibility for those individuals. In terms of whether a demand responsive transport solution is the right one, is one that we would need to consider collectively, I think, between SWestrans, between the council, with third sector Dumfries and Galloway, and with the community transport provider in that area. And indeed, that's something that we can pick up on. And in terms of different models of community transport, that's certainly something that that we're actively discussing with third sector Dumfries and Galloway. I would return to the point that the SWestrans subsidy budget is fully committed, and so in the absence of any funding, it makes, regardless of the model, it makes it challenging to identify the way in which to provide a service there. And I take your point about socially necessary transport and the responsibility and duties that fall to SWestrans in terms of that provision. However, that is tempered by the requirement upon SWestrans and indeed the council to secure best value in terms of managing and creating a balance between quality and cost, and essentially prioritising and ensuring the provision of that subsidy budget in a way in which secures the best transport provision to the majority and represents the most necessary transport. And so on that basis, I guess to some extent we return to the £66 subsidy cost for each passenger and the exceptionally low patronage on those services. But I completely take your point, Councillor Scobie, and we continue to look into it and continue to discuss with community transport operators to see what they can do.
Thanks, Simon. And I don't know if, Karen, do you want to respond on the council's behalf?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Through yourself, I think Simon covered the points. To be fair, in relation to responsibilities and statutory responsibilities. So going forward, you know, members will be aware of you know, agreements within the council to look at the whole subsidised network in conjunction with SWestrans going forward. So we will do that together. The responsibilities do sit, and members of the Fleece Galway Council have received a legal note following the Special Full Council in July, just in terms of what those responsibilities are. However, just to give that assurance, you know, we're coordinating that approach to ensure that the communities get the best possible services that we can provide them, but that has to be done within budget restrictions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Ivor?
Just wondering what's happening with the numerous bus services that currently aren't budgeted for, that we've had to put in place for school kids. Is it 246, 236, 381, 382? Under 317 it says after October there might not be any. What are we planning to do for that?
Thanks, Councillor Hislop. So this will be a question for you then, Karen.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hislop. So just to confirm, I'll pick up on the 246, and then I'll maybe bring Gordon in terms of the subsidised route 236, I think it is, in relation to DGC buses. So it came to our attention on the 21st of August that and members will be aware of this, but it came to our attention that the pupils that travel from Dumfries, so non-entitled pupils, as far as the education policies are set out. And so non-entitled pupils that travel to Thornhill, there was considerable lack of space for those travelling from the Dumfries area. So after a few days of discussions with the commercial operator on the 246, they did not feel that it was commercially viable for them to increase the bus numbers to 2. So members of SWestrans will be aware that the Stagecoach previous provider used to provide 2 buses on that route. Therefore, the capacity was greater than what it is just now. So, as I had concerns in terms of, I guess, safety of the pupils, concerns about pupils getting to education, we did, and I took the decision to put in an interim measure. Now, we're currently working through what that means going forward in terms of next steps following the October holidays. I'm working very closely with education colleagues in relation to that. So I don't have an answer for you today, but I certainly will keep both elected members of the Dumfries and Galway Council and SWestrans Board updated in relation to that. And we will ensure that we get appropriate comms out in time before the schools return after the October holidays. So it's still work in progress. I'll maybe hand over to Gordon if it's all right, just to pick up on the subsidised route there. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Through yourself, Chair. So the 236 was a short-term pressure that was relieved when as Karen's just described, with what happened with the 246, we had an additional bus on for a couple of weeks, just to make sure that as the 246 got down the corridor to Closeburn, that there was still capacity to pick up the entitled kids that were getting on at Closeburn. But that was relieved after a couple of weeks. The other one that was on there, the 381, we have again put a temporary measure in there for 10 entitled pupils that's coming in for Torthorald. But I believe Houstons is putting on a larger bus with greater capacity that will pick that up within the next couple of weeks. So again, short-term pressure, but nothing that we can pick up with existing resources.
Ivor.
Chair, I received correspondence from one lady whose family was travelling from Thorold, and the bigger concern, yes, there wasn't capacity on the bus, but it was also that the bus wasn't getting in time to actually allow the kids to get to school. Now, I can't verify if that's happening or not. I did speak to the headmaster, and he said on the first week anyway, there was no issues with kids not being there in time. But I did notice at the last school board meeting, there was a parent council meetings, it's called now, too old getting. It was brought up as an issue that there's children not getting in time. So I'm just wondering, if we take it away, will that revert back to possibly pupils not actually getting to the school in time?
Thanks. Gordon.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. So we'll continue to work with the headmaster at the high school to make sure that doesn't happen. Lateness for the pupils wasn't something that was reported through to myself and the team, but we're in constant dialogue with Mr. Cubbin at high school, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Thank you. I don't see any other board members, so I'll go to observers, and I've got Laura Moody online. Laura?
Thank you, Chair. Very helpful to get this paper. It does reflect what we've been hearing from members of the bus users group, particularly in regards to the X74 morning service, Glentrill costs on the 500. I've got a couple of questions about the 383, given that sort of developing situation there. Can I check, when you say due to the pupils using it, that the service is coming back, is that just the school service times, or is that bringing back the full service? And also, given what we've just heard and what we know of the unexpected impact of non-entitled school children using transport, has an assessment been made of the numbers using that route, and will they be able to use the 383 going forward?
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Through yourself, thank you, Laura. So with regard to the 383, and on the basis of the conversation that, as I mentioned, had very recently with Houston's coaches, the intention is that 383 will continue to operate exactly the same from the 17th of November, the proposed date of withdrawal as it does today.
Thank you. Has that been helpful, Laura?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, other observers who wants to come in? So, Luke?
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see that the 383 is now going to run as normal. It was quite an unfortunate decision and quite confusing, because in fact a lot of it has got about 42,000 passengers per year, which is quite a lot, and 163 a day on electric minibuses, which is about, I think it's about 9 services per day. So it was quite confusing how it was going, and concerning that the decision was being made at this committee so without much notice. I do know, Simon, I did see an email this morning from you in relation to correspondence I had with the MSP of South Scotland about it. It was being done quite secretly. I do know the board papers are made available on SWestrans' website, but to a normal passenger that would travel by bus, they wouldn't be looking at the SWestrans' website for this information. So that wasn't quite good to see. I did have a few questions with 383, but obviously if it's not going to run as normal, it's quite irrelevant. I did have one on DGC buses, which might be good for you, Gordon, to answer. It was originally said at meetings that DGC buses had reached capacity, although we are now seeing, obviously, with the 236, which I know you said I think it ended, in 381, additional buses have been put in place. So how is that capacity, what has become available to allow that capacity to happen? And with bus service changes, is there any plan in the future to increase capacity on DGC buses?
Thanks, Luke. Gordon?
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Thanks, Luke, for your question. So, DGC buses, like any other operator, has a spare capacity for short-term measures, and that's exactly what we utilised for the 236 and the 381. We have you always worked at 85% utilisation, you need that wee additional percentage there to cover sickness, holidays, training, and sort of emergency situations like that. So that's where the capacity was built in from, Luke. The final part of your question, so you probably noticed we have asked the public to review the timetables that we're operating in the West. Hopefully people will take advantage of the online form that's there, good, bad or indifferent, and that'll help to advise that wider review of DGC buses and whether we should or we shouldn't, or it'll certainly help inform us of what we need to do going forward as DGC buses to support the travelling public.
Thank you, Gordon. So I've got Douglas.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm glad to hear that the progress on the 383, because it saves me having to read 3 pages of constructive comment on the matter, which I'm sure you're glad you're not having to listen to me read either. I did have one ask within that's not really, it's more to do in general with board papers being available online, because I was going to reference certain decisions that had been made in the past. Currently, there's only 2 years of board papers available. As a public body, I would have at least expected a list of papers from the previous years, if not all the papers. All the papers used to be available online, so it's very hard to track decisions. So it's just really an ask that we can look to put either the papers back on or a list of the papers in each board for the 17 years that are missing, and to allow observers, members of the public, to then ask for a certain paper when they need to have a look at that. So that was my ask on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Yeah, Simon, if you want to come in and respond to Douglas as well as Luke's point as well. Right.
Very happy to. Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. Thank you, Douglas, and thank you, Luke. Perhaps just in reverse order, Douglas, very good point. There has been a change to the website, as you might have noticed. As a consequence of that, we seem to have cut down on the number of board papers that are there. We have pushed back on that. We have asked that whether we can include some more historic papers. We'll continue to be in touch with the web team and ask that they do that, and also address the point that we've also made, which is that it's slightly confusing and slightly difficult to find which papers you're looking for because they're not in chronological order. Yeah, this one we've raised with them. I just wanted to pick up, because I'm aware, Luke, you didn't get a response to your initial point from Gordon, and I wanted to challenge your assertion that anything has been done in secrecy here, or indeed that any decision has been made, because no decision has been made by the SWestrans board, which is why we brought it, and no decision has been made by me. The 383 is a commercial bus service operated by Houston Coaches, and if a decision was made by them to withdraw the service, that's a decision that they made. We're in public session here, this is a public meeting, and the papers are available on the SWestrans website, so this is all being carried out in the public domain. Indeed, the conversation now and the suggestion, or indeed the commentary in relation to the 383. So nothing is in secret. However, you are right to say we didn't go to the local community immediately and raise with them the possibility or the expectation that the 383 could be withdrawn, because it would be a discussion and a decision for this board as to whether or not that were to happen. We wouldn't wish to alarm or introduce any anxiety into the local community by the withdrawal of the 383. And as I've said, pleased with the fact that the 383 now isn't being withdrawn, which validates that decision not to have gone to the local community and suggested that it might have been. So I just wanted to respond on those points, because the suggestion to the board was to consider whether or not the 383 should be brought within the subsidised bus network, in light of the fact that the subsidised bus network is, and the budget associated with it, is fully committed. So I hope that clarifies.
Thanks, Simon. Has that been helpful, Luke?
Yeah, it does. I wasn't really describing it maybe in secrecy. It was mainly if it was to get axed, and then it would still. I don't really think it would make much of a difference to the community if it was to be announced before or after, because it would still come as a shock. And if the decision was made, obviously, to agree to let Houston's axe a service, then there wouldn't be a lot for the community to do, or it would be kind of too late at that point, before the next committee. So it was really a concern that they weren't at least made aware. There was no press release, so there was just nothing really said, and all of a sudden the decision would have been made. Obviously, it's not now, but it would have been made to axe a service without the community really knowing about it. That was the concern I had.
Yeah, your points have been noted. Stuart, do you want to come in?
Thank you. I had a few comments on specifically section 4.2, which is the issues identified within the services so far. And this is mostly things which have been brought to me by the immediate ward which I represent, which is the Stewartry. And that is that a lot of the services immediately within the Stewartry, such as, for example, the 500, the 502, etc., and the 372, which is Dumfries to Dalbeattie, have been consistently late, a lot more than they previously had been when it was run by Stagecoach in the last term. And I'm just curious if this is something that is due to the notable, I know there's a lack of buses for the amount of routes which we cover, or if there's anything being done in place to fix this, as the amount that they're late, it's not really manageable for a lot of people to get to things such as school or work appointments, etc. in time, and it's very difficult to plan around this when ones which previously would have been run by Stagecoach, of course, they have an app which allows us to know where and when the buses are and estimate how late we will be in advance. But without this being in place, it's oftentimes that you'll be at a bus stop for another half hour and it's turned up quite early, or other times you'll be waiting around for a long while and it's that late and you're not sure what's exactly happened or when it will happen, or if it's broke down on the road. Is there anything in place to let us know where these buses are at and when they will get there? Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Simon?
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. Thanks for your question, Stuart. All really good points, all really germane and relevant points at the moment, and certainly ones that the SWestrans team is on top of. So, in relation to your point that the vehicles are late, or they may be behind schedule, or there may be breakdowns, in which case the service isn't running at all, then there's an expectation that the operators themselves would alert us at SWestrans, through us as individuals or through our mailbox, and through that we're currently looking into again and revisiting and redoubling our efforts to ensure that we're as responsive as possible, that when we're alerted, we try and ensure that the travelling public are made aware of that. So in an effort to do that, we've reminded the operators just recently that they have an obligation to tell us as soon as possible that there's services that are delayed and aren't meeting expected punctuality targets. And on that basis, we've also just very recently this week looked at ways in which we can improve the process internally in terms of us receiving that notification from the operator, us passing it to the customer service centre, and indeed to the web team, so that we can try and improve that communication as best as possible, because we recognise that there's definite area for improvement there. So that's on the comms piece. In relation to contract management, that's also an area which we're kind of turning the dial on at the moment in terms of the new terms and conditions associated with the contracts that just started 6 weeks ago. That's an area which we're really positive and really optimistic that's a way in which we can frankly hold the bus operators to account more in terms of the subsidy budget that they receive from SWestrans, and indeed there's a variety of different expectations of service standards included within that, which we'll receive monthly reports from the operators. Obviously, we're only six or 7 weeks into the new 3-year contracts, and so we're kind of relatively early stages, and there are certain expectations on the operators which is new to them. So we're guiding them through that process, but as part of that, lost mileage, punctuality targets are all built into that, and so that's a way by which we as SWestrans can continue to not apply pressure, but ensure that we're getting good value for money in terms of the subsidy that we're providing bus operators and the quality of service that we expect in response. So it's an area that we're aware of, and indeed if there's individual comments or complaints that we receive in relation to services that are late or not sufficiently punctual, then we immediately pick that up with the operator and discuss with them. So we are on top of these issues.
Has that been helpful, Stuart?
Yes, that has been helpful. There was one other note on that topic which I wanted to mention. I thought I'd best leave it for once those questions have been answered, so there wasn't quite a long spiel there. And this is once again specifically for the service of the 500, as that's one which is most commonly used generally for those within the west end of Dumfries and Galloway. With the new service, there has been a few spots which haven't actually had a place on the new timetable, where previously we'd had times for Auchenlarry and Kieranholey, as well as other smaller spots along the journey. They're no longer put on the timetable. And while I know it isn't generally one which we have a stop for, it is very commonly used by tourists as well as those who are travelling within the area to things such as holiday destinations, gyms, etc. So it would be very useful to have that noted down so the bus drivers know when they're meant to be passing that by, and it might help, in my view at least, keep them on time for those longer sections of the journey, because they would know when to be there for. As well as there's a notable crowding issue for that service, where previously we'd had on the 500 with the stagecoach service, larger buses which sometimes still remained completely full with people struggling to find seats. With the newer ones, they simply don't have the capacity to meet a lot of the people who are travelling along this service. Is there any plan in place to obtain larger buses in the future, even if at the moment our budget does not provide for it? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. So other stops along the route, it's probably not just the 500 route. It could be other routes as well, you know. So it does make sense if a bus is travelling along a particular road, that people will have an idea of when it's going to go past a particular area. So that's a good point. And overcrowding and larger buses. So, Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for your question. I think Jez responds to your first point, but I'm happy to come back on that if you've got any supplementary questions. But in relation to crowding and capacity on the vehicles, again, it's something that we're in constant contact with the operators on. It's something that we keep under constant review. The bus operator has an obligation to put on a vehicle with a minimum number of seats on, which is specified as part of the bus specifications for the bus service specifications that we released through the procurement exercise earlier this year. If there are issues in relation to those services exceeding that number, then we'll generally hear about it through feedback and complaints, but we'll also usually hear about it from the operator. And indeed, there's been a number of instances where we've either been in discussion with the operator or they've fed back to us that there's issues of capacity and they've been able to put on a larger vehicle. In relation to all the bus operators, but in particular Houston's coaches who operate the 500, I'm aware that because of the extent to which they grew so quickly over a relatively compressed period of time over the summer, they've kind of got growing pains in terms of the delays of taking on new vehicles. And I know for a fact through speaking to Houston's just in the last day or two, they've got a number of larger vehicles that are coming on board and that they're receiving in the space of the next week or two. I don't know for sure whether one of those will be on the 500, but we have regular meetings with all of the operators, including Houston's, in fact, which we have next week. So I'll make a point to bring up that issue with them and inquire about capacity on the 500 with them.
Thanks, Simon. That's been helpful. Are you satisfied with those responses?
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to come in. I've got one particular point, which is about the introduction of the timetables. It says in the report, good progress is being made. Timetables will be printed and distributed. Have we got a sort of like a time when that will happen? Because it seems to be a while since we've managed to get through the timetable. Simon.
Thanks for your question, Chair. Yeah, really good point. It is an area which we're very mindful of, the fact that paper timetables in the bus stops and shelters are not up to date, that they still reflect the previous timetables, which we recognise is far from ideal and doesn't present a good service to the travelling public or to the bus passenger. It's something we're on. I appreciate we've been saying that for some time because of the scale of changes involved across the entire region, the number of bus stops across the region, which exceed 1,000, and frankly limited capacity within the team and the expertise that's required in terms of incorporating all those timetables. into the online system, it has been a continual challenge, and it's one that we're continuing to work on in terms of identifying individuals that are able to support. So it is ongoing work. In terms of what's left remaining, it's a relatively small number of days of work, but the challenge is identifying the individual that can support on that. But we're on it, and we hope to be able to get them updated as soon as possible. I'd also kind of mention that because of the scale of the changes that took place, but also, as you'll see from the table in the report, the extent to which we've been successful in responding to issues and complaints that have been raised with us about ways in which timetables can be tweaked or amended in some way to better suit people using those services. There have been quite a number of changes that have come in as a result of that. So had we, on the 7th of August, had all the timetables up to date, there would have been an enormous exercise of then going back out to amend them with the changes that we'd made. But your point's very well taken, and it's certainly something we're well aware of and prioritising as best we can.
No, I appreciate that. And my final one is, Gordon, you mentioned about the feedback form, particularly for the west of the region, but that feedback form, as far as I know, is for anyone in the region that needs to feedback, so it's not just for people in the west, is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through yourself. You're right, it's feedback for any service across the region. We've just taken the advantage and the opportunity for without reinventing the wheel as such, so it can also be used specifically for the timetables in the west or across the region. So you're spot on.
Thank you. So to encourage members of the public to use that, yep. Okay, so I don't see anyone else wishing to come in, so we'll go to the recommendations, which is one, to note the feedback received from members of the public since the commencement, I'll get my teeth in, commencement of the new local bus contracts on the 7th of August 2025 and the efforts of SWestrans to introduce improvements. We can disregard recommendation 2. 3 was to note the lack of available budget to provide subsidy for the operation of the X75 Stranraer Newton Stewart or for continuation of additional buses on the A76 corridor in support of non-entitled school children to access Wallace Hall Academy. 4 is to note the proposed next steps to introduce further improvements to the bus network across Dumfries and Galloway with 250k investment in local bus network planning. Happy to note those. Yep. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 10, which is the Scottish Parliament election 2026. This is the SWestrans manifesto ask. We've got Simon Bradbury and Kirsty Dunsmore are here to assist. So I'll pass it over to you first of all, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing in particular to add on this paper, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Have you anything to add, Kirsty? No? Okay, I'll just open it up to board members. First of all, Willie.
Thanks, Chair. You heard me mention when we had the presence of Paul Junick there in terms of the £10 billion that either has been spent or committed over the last 10 years, and how the Dumfries and Galloway, and particularly the south of Scotland corner, has only received 0.04% of that capital investment put into Dumfries and Galloway with the 3 road networks, the 75, 76, 77. And I think on page 24 we need to strengthen that in asking political parties to insert into their manifesto that we don't become or remain the forgotten corner of Scotland in terms of capital investment. The figure I refer to, Paul didn't challenge because he knows that that's a correct figure. And many MSPs have used that in Parliament when they're addressing this issue. So I think we need to be asking the political parties to include that in their manifesto, that we get our fair share of capital investment on our trunk roads, recognising the importance that Paul did put over, just how important it is to the link to Northern Ireland, particularly in Scotland on the 77. And again, you heard me say, it contributes to the Scottish economy much more than the 75 and 76 in terms of goods in and out from Northern Ireland. So I would hope that we strengthen this in terms of what's being said there on the basis of factual information, figures that are available, and I can provide that, Chair, so that we do get that. What we're really looking for is almost a Fergus Ewan in the Parliament, for someone to be the champion for these roads, the way that Fergus Ewan has done on the A9, and that's a perfect example of how he presents his case. We need somebody from the political parties to be a champion for our area in Dumfries and Galloway. And I think we should highlight that we are looking for a champion when you do go into Parliament to be advocating and representing our interest in Dumfries and Galloway. So I would just ask for that to be strengthened in that way, Chair.
Yeah, and just on the back of that, I had something almost similar to yourself. Can there be more of a push for national transport project funding to align with regional transport priorities so that local priorities can be supported at a regional level, perhaps also having regard for regional economic strategies? So if that can be attached to what you're asking, Willie. So, Simon?
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself, thank you, Councillor Scobie. I think what I'm hearing from you is correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing a general agreement with that particular manifesto ask around delivering investment in our strategic transport network, but building it and bolstering it through the figures that you mentioned, Councillor Scobie, which I'm very happy to do. So this paper sets out a starter for 10 in terms of what the initial half dozen manifesto ask could be, but this isn't the way in which we'd present it to the political parties. As I think I mentioned, the document was distributed with a covering letter, so we'll strengthen that case in the way in which you both suggest.
Thank you. Any other board members? Don't see anyone online, so I'll open it up to observers. No? Okay, so we'll go to the... Oh, sorry. Laura Moody, I see you online.
Yes, thank you for that. I had a question about the sort of numbering on the paper. Is that an order of prioritisation, or is it just for ease of following? I mean, obviously from the bus group's point of view, item 3, 4, 5 and 6 on that would probably be a higher priority than perhaps item 2. I just want to point out as well, during the Transport Scotland presentation, I did a little bit of number crunching, and I feel compelled to point out that the revenue invested in routine maintenance for the A75 alone in the last 2 years would fund SWestrans for more than 300 years. And the capital investment of £50 million since 2007 would buy 225 new eco-buses. So if we're talking forgotten corners, I would suggest public transport, and particularly buses, are a higher priority than spending on roads.
Bearing in mind that buses use roads. So, no, I take your point, Laura. No, my understanding is these are our 6 priority asks to go into the manifesto asks to political groups and non-political groups when it comes to the 2026. It's addition to the RTP chairs meeting that we had, where there's a number of asks in there, but we're trying to keep it sort of short and with links leading on to each of the individual RTPs so that they can look up and say, well, what's happening in Dumfries and Galloway? These are our 6 priority asks, and we're being asked to sort of strengthen that so that that link could then be passed on. I take that's the route that we're taking then, Simon.
Exactly right, Chair, thank you. And in response to your question, Laura, no, these 6 were not, when I drafted them, intended to be in priority order. They were in an order that intended to make some sense, and that I grouped the ones relating to funding, both long-term, ring-fenced, and investment in the strategic transport network, which by strategic transport network, I didn't just mean roads, and I think I name check rail enhancements in there as well. So that's about kind of broad investment, and then followed by, as you say, the other 3 or 4 that are relating to public transport. So very happy to present them in such a way when we submit those manifesto asks to the relevant political parties.
Thank you, Simon. Has that been helpful, Laura?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to come in, so we'll go to recommendations. And the recommendations for the board to consider and discuss the manifesto asks outlined in this report, which we have done. Agree the final SWestrans manifesto asks for submission to the Scottish political parties. And 3, approve the dissemination of the final manifesto asks to the Scottish political parties and their manifesto teams. I think that's it. So are we happy to do that? Yeah. Thank you, members. Willie? Okay, so I hope nobody else leaves after you then, Willie. But if you are heading off, I'd just like to say on behalf of the board, it's been an honour and a pleasure having you on the board over the years. You certainly kept me up at night, so I wish you well in your future, whatever that may be. So thank you very much, Willie. Well, for those members online, Willie did respond, but he wasn't keen to say it on microphone. So thank you very much, Willie. So now, members, we move on to agenda item 11, which is the bus stops in Dumfries and Galloway. We've got Sarah Jane Alsop is here to assist. So over to you, Sarah. Anything to add to your report?
Thank you, Chair. For yourself, no, nothing to add to the report.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it up to board members. No one coming in. Observers, I've got Douglas.
Sorry, Chair, but I've just one simple question, Sarah Jane. The report at page 27, paragraph 4.1 mentions the installation of real-time information boards, which will be very much welcomed, I think, by passengers across the region. It doesn't mention that there's an actual system to run these, and if so, is there a system? Is it being procured, and is that going to be funded by SWestrans or by the council? Sorry.
Thanks, Douglas. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Douglas. Yes, as you'll have knowledge from your previous employment, there are a number of systems involved in linking the timetables, the ticket machines within the buses, and the real-time passenger information boards that we propose to install at 100 sites across the region. In answer to your question, yes, software is going to be procured to support and join up those various pieces of the puzzle. That will be funded through the Levelling Up Fund investment, and there will be a number of years' worth of subscription involved within that purchase that's made. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been helpful. Anyone else? Don't see anyone wishing to come in. Oh, Laura, last minute.
Sorry, I did put in the chat that I wanted to come in. I've got a few things to say on this. So first of all, actually really good, much appreciated. Builds on the census that we've already seen. The design principles in the appendix, really great, and I think it's been missing until now. Provision of real-time bus but it shouldn't be at the expense of rolling out up-to-date timetables for all the bus stops that we have now. And the covering paper mentions resources needing to be made available for maintenance, and that's really important. it's good that volunteer groups take on bus stops, but it has to be part of the budgeting in the long run. There's a couple of things I'd like to suggest. From 3.1 of the paper, I think there's essentially a bit missing. Update and replacement of timetables at the bus stop isn't really addressed in the paper, but it is quite important, especially for bus users who don't have reliable access to the internet. And obviously that's critical since the change in August. When it comes to the bus stop, the shelters, the appendix refers to the option of perch seating or seats. The Transport Focus study on bus shelter design in April 2025 indicated at slide 11 that the majority of users prefer seats rather than perches, and the bus users group agrees with that. So it might be helpful if SWestrans could endorse the principle that seats are preferred to perches where possible. The covering note doesn't refer to the timetable design for the panels at the bus stops. At the moment, these are all customised for every bus stop to denote the timing for that stop. As a number of the bus stops in the region are served by only one bus route, it might be simpler and more efficient, and dare I say cheaper, on those routes to have the full timetable on display in each stop, so that it's easier and less costly to update them rather than the individual time for specifically that stop. And the last point on this, sorry, there's been quite a lot. There's no mention of the sustainable transport map, which is still on the SWestrans website. It dates from 2016. The board probably might want to think about updating it, but it should influence the bus shelter purchasing programme. So obviously, whether to buy bus shelters that actually have map panels in them. And if there are no plans to update the map, then there does need to be some thought given to the purpose of installing them, if we're going to do that. And that's everything. Sorry, it's quite a lot.
No, thanks very much, Laura. Yeah, some good points there. So do you want to pick up on some of those, Sarah Jane?
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. Just to say thank you very much for that valuable feedback. We'll ensure that that the bits and pieces are fed into the specification that's submitted for the updated bus shelters that are to be procured, and specifically in relation to seating. And obviously feedback will be passed on to the SWestrans team in relation to the, not customising timetables, etc., and presenting the entire route. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think there was the active travel map as well, wasn't it, Laura, that you mentioned? So is that something, as a board, we should pick up?
Thank you, Chair. And through yourself, yeah, thanks, Laura. The sustainable travel map, you're right. It's quite old. It does go back a little while, and it doesn't reflect the most up-to-date landscape of the bus network and also the active travel network. In readiness for the 7th of August new contracts, we did look to pull together, indeed, we have a draft bus network map. It's not yet on the website. It's an ambition. We'd like to get it up there. But in light of the fact that there are further changes to the bus network that are still ongoing, as we've discussed today and as I include in the paper, we don't want to get the bus network map up online just for it to be kind of immediately obsolete or out of date or have changes incorporated. So, touch wood, it feels like the bus network is potentially getting to a point where the dust is settling and the number of changes that we make to it, notwithstanding the feedback form and the consultation that's going on across the West. Once that starts to settle down and once we start to get stability in the bus network, then we'll definitely get to a point where we get that map back online. But that's a new map, not an update to the sustainable travel map. That's one that we will bear in mind and potentially look to update, that incorporates both active travel routes and public transport routes in due course.
Yep, thanks for that. Any other one wishing to come in? Any observers? No. Shakes the head. So we'll move to recommendations. And the recommendation is the members of the board are asked to agree the standard design principle for the region's bus stops, which will be used as a template for future bus bus stop infrastructure. I'm happy to do so. We are, and we did take an action there, didn't we, about the sustainable map. So thank you, members. Move on to agenda item 12, which is the Levelling Up Fund project update. Again, we've got Sarah Jane also up here to assist. So anything to add, Sarah Jane?
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. Just as a matter of note, I just wanted to highlight there's a minor error in paragraph 2.1 of the report. The funding awarded for the Levelling Up Fund transport bids is noted as 17,698,000. Apologies, that refers to a culture and regeneration bid through round 2. The total funding for the Levelling Up for transport bid is actually 13,752,000. So just a minor point of update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it up to board members first. Don't see anyone online, so I'll open it up to observers. No. I think everybody's satisfied with that report, and so we'll just move to recommendations. So members of the board are asked to note the update on the Levelling Up Fund transport project, so thank you very much. Now move on to agenda item 13, which is the Capital Expenditure Programme 2025 to 2025/26 to 2026/27. This update, Simon Bradbury is here to assist. Anything to add, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing further to add on this paper.
Thank you. I'll open it up to board members. Don't see anyone coming online. I'll open it up to observers. Nope. Nope. Another quick report, so thank you very much. So we'll move to the recommendations, which was 1, to agree the capital programme outlined in the report, and 2, note the update on capital spend in the 2025/26 financial year. Happy to do so. Yep. We'll now move on to agenda item 14. This is observer appointment. Claire, this is your report. Anything to add to this?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up to board members. No. Observers? Luke?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really good that if we do agree to get a representative from McCall's coaches, I think it'd be really good. I'm just wondering if it would also be worth, if members agree, for the board to reach out to Houston's coaches to get a representative from them if possible. So we can have representatives from the 2 biggest bus companies in the region now. So if that could happen, that'd be really good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Claire in.
Thank you. Just to provide some assurance, Houston's and a number of other operators, organisations have been approached, so as and when those come forward, they'll be presented to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else wishing to come in. So we'll go to the recommendations. Members of the board are asked to agree to appoint Kirsten Lorna Stannis as an observer to the SWestrans board for a period of 4 years. Happy to do so. Yep. Okay. So the final agenda item is any other business deemed urgent by the chair due to the need for a decision. I've not been notified of any urgent business, so I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you.